This is just going to be a little bonus chat. I'm going to answer some questions I fielded about grouping beats and about practicing and things getting a little more difficult. So I just want to share some thoughts with you today in a very informal way. If you feel like things are getting a little bit more difficult suddenly, and like you're having trouble getting your body to perform some of the exercises I'm asking you to do, please don't worry, don't fret, and don't think you're slow or abnormal. I've been teaching now for over 2 decades, and one thing I can say is that, well, there are certainly variations in terms of ease of learning from student to student. Every student gets stuck and encounters difficulties in various areas. When I'm working one-on-one with the student, I'm able to navigate that with them, break things down into smaller chunks, and settle at that level for as long as we need to until they grasp that and really understand the material and have mastered it and feel ease with it before we move on. The tricky thing in a video setting like this is that I can't do that on a one-on-one basis with you. So I'm doing my best to kind of pace things and make things step by step, but it is totally normal and expected that you will get stuck on some things. So I want to give you some tools and some ways of thinking to just kind of help you navigate this issue. So first of all, I just want to remind you that we're learning a language and we're learning a completely new skill. And not only are we just trying to understand it, we're trying to get our bodies to realize it and perform it. So that's even an additional step, and a step that people often don't realize is its own difficulty in and of itself. I want you to consider again a child learning to read. They learn the alphabet, they learn letter sounds, they learn to blend, they learn how to put syllables together, they learn more difficult words. This can literally take years, 4, 5 years sometimes, from start to finish, to just read it like, let's say, a 5th grade level. Okay, and kids are wired to learn, especially wired to learn language. So it is expected that it should take us as either adults or people old enough to watch this video at least that long to gain genuine ease and fluency with music reading. You will learn these concepts over the next several months, but don't expect to magically become fluent in it. If you want to become fluent in it, it's going to take time, and it's also going to take practice. So again, I'm going to have a whole video series coming up in a few more lessons about just practice, but I'll kind of give you a sneak peek of that. So the first step of this process is, of course, just learning and understanding the concepts. But to develop genuine ease and fluency and the ability to get your body to do what your brain is telling it to do is a whole nother thing. I'm gonna recommend that if that's a goal of yours, to establish the habit of practicing. I say habit because I would treat it just like that. Aim low for duration, high for frequency. We tend to learn best when we can practice 6 out of 7 days. Do it at the same time of day every day if you can, and treat it like a non-negotiable, like something like brushing your teeth. You'll be shocked at how much 3 minutes a day sounds like nothing. 5 minutes a day, 10 is amazing. If you can devote that to regularly hacking away at this in manageable chunks, and we'll talk about that in a second, you will make progress. You won't see miraculous results from one day to the next, but you will see results if you are diligent like that. 6 out of 7 days, small chunks, but super consistent. You absolutely will make progress. I genuinely can promise that. Okay, and then we want these sessions to be stress-free, as stress-free as possible. So anytime you start feeling very frustrated or overwhelmed with what you're trying to do, it means it's too hard for you. And I don't mean that like you're not ready for it. I mean, you have to think of ways to break the problem down into smaller parts. So for example, let's say you show a child cat, and you ask them to sound that word out, and they're just like overwhelmed, tears, what would you do in that situation? Well, you could say, well, what letter is that, right? That's a C, that's an A. Start with that. And then they've done it and they've achieved it. They're capable of it, so they feel like, yes, success, right? So you start them there where they can succeed. And you're still going to get to cat, but you're just going to break this down into manageable chunks for them. And then you might say, what does a C say? And if they forget, can you say that after me? Great. Okay, tell me the letter names again. Great, good job. What does that letter say again? Oh, you can continually review these easy steps, give them success. So you want to create that same environment you would work to create for a child. Break things down into the smallest chunk possible. If you don't know how to do that with an exercise we've done, then please comment and I will make videos helping you break that down. Okay, so here are some ideas of how to break down, for example, what we've done so far. Number one, turn the metronome off and or go slower. So what you could do is keep working with the metronome maybe to establish the pulse. If even that is difficult, then turn it off. Then just try roughly to keep a pulse. When that's easy for you, and you'll know it because you won't feel stressed and you'll have a few brain cells left over to look outside, then you might continue that for another 2 days until it gets super easy to the point it's boring. Then turn your metronome on to a slow tempo, start matching that. You could practice the difficulties separately. You say to yourself, well, what's hard about this? Keeping a steady beat, making it match the metronome, getting my mouth to do something different than my hands, right? So what we can do is we can separate each of those things, and then again, we can try to put them together, and we can do it at a slower speed. For example, again, clapping the beat alone without the metronome, clapping the beat with the metronome. And then we could also separate the rhythm in our mouths from the clapped pulse, potentially even from the metronome. Now, I know that might be like, well, but you've said over and over that the rhythm is dependent on the pulse. It is, but we can be a little bit gentler with how we're tracking the pulse and what we're asking our bodies to do with that pulse. For example, I could just try and think a steady pulse, potentially even put the metronome on. That might be easier for you than also clapping. So I could just have the metronome going or just be thinking a pulse, and I could ask myself to say a do followed by a rest, a one beat rest, followed by a do, followed by a one beat rest, a one beat note, one beat rest. And it could look something like this. I could just think to myself, 1, 2, ready, go, do, rest, do, rest, do, rest. Seeing my body do something during the rest, but I'm not doing it in a time pressured way by also keeping, let's say, even the metronome going or keeping our hands going. So you're still trying to keep a steady tempo and a sense of pulse, but you're not being quite as rigid with it, which can make it a little bit easier. Then you put the pieces together. So you turn the metronome on at a slow speed that feels comfortable to you. You get your beat going and you try putting the rhythm with that. Repeat that process as often as needed until it's easy. When it's easy, when it's not stressful, when you can do it in a relaxed manner, that's when you're ready to layer on the next difficulty. And I would sit at that space sometimes for a while. Let it be easy for several days in a row so you really build ease, fluency, genuine skill before you continue to layer on the next. I promise if you are chipping away at it like this, saying C-A-T, C-A-T, and then the 2 weeks later, k-a-t, k-a-t, and 3 weeks later, blending that together as best you can. This is all good. That child will learn to read, and you will learn to read music, even if it takes a while. Another point in learning to now realize and perform beat and rhythm is that it's a whole nother skill and a whole nother area of learning for your brain to get the right signal to whatever part of your body is involved in performing, whether it's your mouth as a singer or your hands as an instrumentalist. It is working to get the instructions from your brain to the fingertips or to your mouth at the right time in the right way. So we need to be very patient and slow and careful with that wiring process. I call it slow motion practice often. It doesn't matter how long it takes you to do the right action in terms of like if it takes you 30 seconds to say, psych yourself up, think through the beat and go do at exactly the right time, right? One correct. And you've just wired it correctly. And you can do another one in the next 30 seconds, and that's two. Okay. And then you sleep. And then tomorrow you do the same thing. And your brain is very fast at realizing, oh, this is an important pathway because we've done the exact same thing 4 times now. While he sleeps tonight, while she sleeps tonight, I'm going to work on myelinating that. So there's several books about this concept of like, whatever you do the most, your brain will strengthen those connections while you sleep. So what you want to be really careful about is that you do the right thing only, if at all possible, rather than do it quickly and do it 10 times incorrect, 3 times correctly, which is, by the way, also very frustrating and stressful. We can do 2 correct repetitions very slowly, and we can do that again the next day, and you will see progress is this. And you just take off. Slow foundation building, and it takes a lot of patience and trust in this process that really, truly, if you go slow, you will be able to go fast actually really soon versus trying it fast, trying it fast, trying it fast, trying it fast day after day. And you are like 2 correct ones, 9 wrong. And you're literally actually worse off than if you hadn't really done anything because your body will do whatever it's done most. So if you've done 8, 9 incorrect repetitions because you insisted on doing it quickly and rushing yourself through it and getting that out and getting frustrated with your body for not understanding what your brain's trying to tell it, you're actually worse off in terms of your brain understanding how to connect with your fingers or your mouth. So go super slowly, aim for correct wiring, correct repetitions. We go slow to go fast. Okay, so I've been talking about grouping beats and downbeats being the most emphasized. Let me just clarify this a little bit. And perhaps I wasn't careful enough with my words. The downbeat is emphasized internally eventually. It's more that the downbeat eventually is going to be, let's say if we're counting in groups of 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Internally, in time, you may even naturally already sense this. Because it's 1, we just feel that more strongly. It's the way we kind of know where we are in the music. That is not to say that in all music, all the time, that's the loudest note, for example, that we play. It's that internally that helps us keep track of where we're at, because that will be the start of each measure. So I needed to emphasize this because it's an important point. But if you're getting hung up on that, forget when I'm saying group beats into 4s, forget it. Forget it. It's not really important in the big picture. You'll feel that in time, and it's mostly important as we move forward, and it'll help you as you're reading. But it's almost something very subconscious that happens. I want you to know it's called the downbeat. I want you to know that when we conduct, that's why we do that. And it's what we subconsciously feel as marking each measure, each group of beats. But many times, either by what the composer marks or just a musical choice, we don't play that as the loudest or strongest note in the measure. In fact, sometimes, frequently, there's a rest there. There's a silence on the downbeat. So it's internally that we're feeling 1, 1, 1. We feel that as the most important pulse and our way of sort of tracking time, if that makes sense. So my point being, if that's hanging you up, don't worry about emphasizing it. Just hear me say it, file it in the back of your brain. Don't worry about clapping more on those beats. Focus on the steady pulse, focus on getting your mouth to coordinate with your hands. That's really what we're doing right now.